Daredevil Born Again. This show has been, I would say, about almost 7 years in the making. This has been a
Sheesh.
long time coming for this Daredevil series. Historically, we already know, and we've talked about this quite a few times on the show, that this is a continuation of that Daredevil series that premiered on Netflix all the way back in 2015, nearly a decade ago. That first Daredevil series came on in Netflix and kind of set the world on fire and showed us what was capable with the character in live action, showed us a different
Mhm.
side of more mature types of Marvel stories that we hadn't quite seen up until that point. And I think it got a lot of people excited about the character. And then, of course, there were all the spinoffs, Jessica Jones and Iron Fist and Luke Cage, so on and so forth. But unfortunately, that series and the rest of those series had premature cancellations because their viewership had just dropped quite dramatically over the course of their runs. But here comes Marvel Studios and resurrecting this franchise and this particular set of characters for their own streaming platform, Disney Plus, in an attempt to sort of revitalize the Daredevil character within their own MCU, but then also to bring back a lot of these actors that previously portrayed these roles. And so we're going to dive in and talk about the episodes that have debuted on Disney Plus so far. But before we get into interviews and thoughts and things of that nature, I just want to ask
Mhm.
you, what was your relationship to those original series that premiered on Netflix all those years ago, in particular the Daredevil series, but of course, the other ones if you want to touch on those, such as Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, so on
Mhm.
and so forth. What was your relationship like to those shows?
I remember first hearing about it and being pretty excited about at least the concept and the idea of what those shows could be. Of course, specifically talking about Daredevil to kind of kick off the entire thing. I remember being like, "We're doing what on Netflix? Okay, this is interesting." And again, I think for a lot of people that also again watch Marvel, a lot of us were at the same time, at least in the early stages, was watching some of those early CW DC shows as well, right? Like a lot of people were tuning in to Arrow, a lot of people were tuning in to Flash, and then when they first said, the Daredevil was happening, I'm like, oh, okay, we're finally doing it's kind of like this TV show ground level thing, like something that people can tune into. That's not a big Marvel movie and it should be interesting. Let's see what happens. And so season one of Daredevil happens, and easy to say that I was like, oh, I love this direction of the direction that this thing is going in, because this is some of the darkest stuff we've ever gotten outside of the MCU. You know what I mean? Like this was a potential of what this thing could be, because I think Marvel always has this. A lot of people always tell you DC is darker than Marvel is, and I think often that can be true. But there are these really cool dark parts of Marvel that exist that fans want to see, and Daredevil is that. Daredevil represents that, is one of the things that represents that dark population within Marvel. And so I was really excited to watch it. It turned out to be really good, so I was excited to see the other shows. Jessica Jones, I think, was pretty well written. Luke Cage has some really good and cool moments. I don't even like to talk about the other show that's on that docket over there, but man, I think they at least had some good ideas and some good creative juices flowing over there with what the street levels and the defenders could be. Of course, everything didn't work out. Of course, everything wasn't perfect, but man, I did enjoy what I got. I was happy they even tried to do the thing. Who would have conceptualized a Jessica Jones show on Netflix? That would have never, crossed my mind, but I'm really glad they decided to do it. And I think loving that Daredevil series, man, again, seeing where that show could take us and seeing how we got here is like, of course, we've come full circle. It makes sense that, Marvel decided to I think round it back up and kind of go back and bring back some of those elements of the Netflix series here. But man, I just remember being, I think, just happy that the shows existed because they represented something that the MCU didn't.
It was a particularly cool time, I would say. Obviously, the MCU was on a very, very significant hot streak by that point. 2015, they had already put out two Avengers movies. A lot of their individual movies were successful, super successful at that, and so
Mm-hmm.
it was full steam ahead on the MCU from the theatrical side of things. And it's interesting looking back on that time, and it was a decade ago. This is pre-streaming wars, and so the idea that Disney and Marvel as a company licensed out characters to Netflix, like that would never happen anymore. But they did that at that time to experiment and to give some of these more street level heroes opportunity and moments to shine in a way that they just theatrically probably wouldn't work out as well. Not to mention the fact that just the more mature subject matter was super well suited for Netflix because there were no rating restrictions. And at that time, the
Mm-hmm.
MCU hadn't explored more mature subject matter. We just hadn't
Yeah.
gotten to that place, and everything was not necessarily under one roof. And so there was just like a whole different creative outlet and team, and just a different prioritization with those shows that was completely separate from the MCU. And we've talked
Mhm.
about this a couple of times, that this was not under the stewardship of Kevin Feige. This was a whole different division working on these shows. And I think the initial foundation of it all was working for the most part. Now, along the
Mhm.
way, things got very murky, and it became an extremely mixed bag by the end result of all of those shows, and
Yeah.
kind of what it coalesced into with the Defenders show, which was meant to be the crossover event. That was very underwhelming, I think, compared to what we had previously saw on the theatrical side of things with the Avengers. But along the way, the Daredevil show never wavered. I love all three of those seasons. The first season in particular is really incredible. Season 2 is, I mean, damn near, probably minus one episode. It's almost like flawless television to me.
Mhm.
And then the third season is also really, really strong. They just maintained a level of quality all throughout the story there. And so when it was canceled, it was really disappointing. It was
Yeah.
definitely, I think, a shot to fans that supported that show and knew the work and just the care that was put in by the filmmakers. And then of course Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, who were pitch perfect castings for their respective roles. And
Mhm.
so it felt like that it was going to be a huge missed opportunity that we had only scratched the surface with their characters and their stories for 3 seasons. But along the way, many things changed. The business changed. Obviously, Disney acquired or reacquired a lot of these heroes after the license had expired over at Netflix. And that led us to kind of where we are now with this new Daredevil Born Again television series. But we're going to dive into more of these things, obviously, the creative overhaul aspect of it and how that might have influenced what we've ultimately seen. But as we dive into this conversation, let's just start off with your big picture thoughts. How did you feel about these first 2, 3 episodes, however many you've watched so far? How did you feel
Mhm.
about this opening batch of episodes for Daredevil Born Again?
Came in, we just talked about it, super excited for Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio to come back. Even though we did see him a little bit in Echo, but just excited to see the characters. I think I love back again, and again they have been sprinkling them out. Again, we even seen Charlie Cox in No Way Home and She Hulk, and they've been kind of sprinkling them to, I guess, get us ready for this moment for the big, return. But I have to say it feels good. I think to be back. I was pretty as excited as I was. I was pretty worried about how first couple episodes can be everything, for a series. But I think what they've done so well is they've taken these characters that we've known for a long time in Matt Murdock, in Kingpin, and they said, how do we mature them? I think in the coolest, in a really good way that suits their character, but also kind of, you know, the viewers have matured too. We don't want to see the same exact story that we've seen in the Netflix series. How do we grow them? And I think they've done some things in these first couple episodes to say, look, y'all, this isn't the same Daredevil, nor is this the same Wilson Fisk, these are different people. And I really appreciate that. I think about these first couple episodes that we've seen so far. And of course, that first episode, it opens with some crazy stuff. You know what I'm saying? It opens with, look, this is what this is, and we've talked about that. Born Again, that the comic run that it follows, it's like 5 or 6 issues. It's a crazy dark run, even for Daredevil. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? And I think they tried to set that tone pretty early. And so in terms of the characters we got, and again, I'm happy to see them back. And I'm enjoying that aspect of things. It also opens with some decent direction, but some very questionable CGI. That man, I think once you get past it, everything's okay. But man, there was a couple moments in there I was like, oof, we could have used some more time on these things, which is very keen to some of the other Disney Plus shows that we've seen. That's one of the things in the other Disney Plus shows that I've seen here that's like, dang it, man, I wish we could get over this thing. I wish we could get over this hump. But that being said, another thing I really do enjoy is we've gotten back to, I think, what the courtroom case for Matt Murdock. You know what I mean? Like, I almost feel like what we're doing in this show is even closer to what She-Hulk should have been in some ways, and what we've looked for in She-Hulk. Like, look, where's the courtroom law stuff that we're looking for? This is a courtroom drama that they're giving us in these episodes in this story, and I'm appreciating, I think, those parts about it as well. It's like, sure, Daredevil, of course, is a character. We want to see him, we want to see fights and all that stuff. But Matt Murdock as a character is also just as impressive, and he can do really things, and he's in a different place. And so I think following him, following Wilson Fisk and other things that he has going on, it's been a really cool, I think, start to what this show could be. We still have to stick the landing, but so far, I think we're doing pretty good.
So I think these opening episodes of Daredevil Born Again, for me, have been mixed to good. I'm not negative on it, and I'm not all the way high and positive on what we've seen so far. There's some elements that I really like, in particular, which is to no surprise, Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio still continue to be incredible. They've not lost a step. All of that stuff still works with their characterizations and where we find them at in this show. And also just the moments that they share, as brief as they are in these opening episodes, are just absolutely electric. I just love that stuff across the board. The stuff that I'm a little bit more mixed about, this is just one of those unfortunate aspects of this show and just the placement of it and how we contextualize it against history. I can't help but compare it to the Netflix show, because now they've put us in a position where they're asking us to compare it to the Netflix show, because this is a continuation. This is not an isolated standalone thing. This is not a brand new thing. Yes, it takes place many, many years after what we previously saw with those 3 seasons. However, it still exists within that same continuity. And when I look at it from just a pure filmmaking perspective, a technical perspective, and even tonal and thematic things, it hasn't quite gripped me in the way that the Netflix series did just yet. I'm going to obviously continue to give it the benefit of the doubt, because we've only gotten a third of this season's episodes. Apparently, there's going to be 9. They've released 3. There's still a lot more to see. But I do have a lot of questions about, and we're going to dive into this. I have a lot of questions just about the existence of this show in comparison to that original Netflix show. I'm still a little confused, and I wonder if Marvel even knows exactly what they're trying to achieve in terms of our relationship to the original series versus what we're getting in this new story. So I don't know if these first 3 episodes have necessarily answered that. Some things they have, certainly, but also I still have questions and question, I think a lot of things that we've read about or that we've heard from different executives over at Marvel Studios. But these 3 episodes are pretty solid. A few really, really great moments in them, a few questionable moments within them, but they're pretty solid so far. And I think out of the 3, I really like the first episode quite a
Yeah, me
bit.
too.
Episode 3, the one that just dropped a day ago, is probably my least favorite for a number of reasons, but I think that they're in a pretty solid spot, and it's an extremely low bar. So I hate to even say this, but this is already proving to be one of their better efforts on the television side of things from Marvel Studios. But again, that's a very low bar, because a lot of their TV shows have just been very subpar and mediocre. We're going to dive into spoilers and really kind of unpack this conversation. So if you've not seen any of these episodes of Daredevil Born Again, what do you listen to this for? I would encourage you to go watch those episodes and come back and finish out the rest of our conversation. And as we start to open this conversation up and really get into it, I do want to talk about this creative overhaul that happened with Daredevil Born Again, because this show was not conceived as a continuation from the Netflix show. In fact, it was going to be a standalone, isolated thing. However, along the way in the production of the show, Marvel Studios decided to make a pretty significant pivot. In fact, back in 2023, while the writer strikes and the actor strikes were underway, Marvel Studios had a chance to review all the stuff that they had shot for the show. And they just decided like what they shot was not working. And so they decided to overhaul the series with a new creative direction. They fired their original writers of the show, brought on new directors. It was a big, big sweeping overhaul. And ultimately, they decided to make this a continuation and continue on that story that was established with those 3 seasons at the Netflix show. And in fact, there were reports going around that the original creators, Corman and Ord, that their episodic take on the show largely deviated from what the Netflix series had established. And in fact, Charlie Cox did not appear in his Daredevil costume until the 4th episode, which I remember when we read that and other people read that, it was like, oh, that's a curious choice. The 4th episode, that's a pretty long way within the context of the story that they're telling. But Marvel ultimately decided, again, to pivot, make it a continuation. They were going to retain some of the elements of the things that they had shot. Apparently, they shot 6 episodes worth of stuff before they decided to make this pivot. But they were going to retain certain elements, but then to get it a little bit closer to the tone of the series, they were going to tie it in with all that stuff on Netflix. a few recastings, a few people were brought back, such as Deborah Ann Wool and Eldon
Mm-hmm.
Henson, who we know portrayed both Karen and Foggy in that original series. And Brad Winderbaum, who's the head of streaming and television over at Marvel Studios, he said that, the studio thought that they could, quote, play it loose with the history of Daredevil, but when they reviewed what had been shot up until that point, they realized that they would have either had to fully embrace the Netflix series or just
Mm-hmm.
completely start over fresh. So again, it just doesn't feel like they totally knew exactly what direction they wanted to go in until they finally, put their foot down and said, this is what we're doing. And
Mm-hmm.
Vincent D'Onofrio has said numerous times that, it was ultimately Kevin Feige who listened to both him and Charlie Cox when they voiced their concerns about the project up until that
Mm-hmm.
point. It's just the fact
Mm-hmm.
that it just wasn't working for what they were trying to do. So now with these 3 episodes out and seeing how the story's unfolding, what do you think about just the existence of this show in comparison to that original show? Because we are expected, if you watch that show, to kind of pick up where we left off in certain respects, remember these characters and their relationships and the things that happened to them, and then ultimately see how it transitions into this new story that they're trying to tell. How do you feel about just that synergy that has to exist between these two different stories and these two different eras of
Yeah.
Daredevil?
It's a really, I think, tricky and hard thing to do, right? Like, because this isn't one of those, I think, like legacy sequels that we've been getting in these movies and other TV shows over the years, and they're attempting, like you said, to make a continuation. So it's been a weird watch in some ways, where the creative differences, not I wouldn't say take you out of it, but you're watching it and you're like, this isn't the same show, but you're at the same time, you are recognizing that's, of course, some of the elements are the same show. I don't know. It's like, it's kind of distracting in some ways, I think, when you're watching it, because your brain is currently picking and choosing like the things that you're familiar and comfortable with, and say, oh yeah, okay, I'm familiar with that, and then being like, this doesn't feel the same, or like that felt weird, or that felt different, or that looks different. And so I think it's a very hard and tall task for them to do this at all. Like this is kind of weird, I think, across the board, trying to figure out how this works. I think there are ways in which, and maybe it's because it's early in the series too, right? Maybe by like episode 5 or 6, I'm like, okay, I'm here, I'm comfortable, I feel the connection, you know what I mean? And it's not that I don't feel the connection, but when it's been so long, when everything, when the camera moves different, when the directors are different, when the tone is different, it's gonna be a kind of one of those different feelings that you get when you're watching the show. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride, I guess, to say the least, because there's just so much constant calculation almost going on, and it shouldn't necessarily have to be that way, if that makes sense. It should just be, I can flow and watch the show and be like, yeah, this is a continuation of the Netflix series. But unfortunately, again, the nature of things, it's just not the case. So yeah, it's been a weird watch.
Yeah, I mean that it's a weird predicament to be in because there's really no way around it. This is a different
Hmm.
studio, a different regime, a different creative team. Everything is literally different about this show, with the exception of the actors who've reprised their roles.
Exactly.
And
Hmm.
we've gone through this all the time in Hollywood. When you think about maybe a series of films, when you have a filmmaker make the first and second movie, and then for whatever reason they drop out of the third movie, they don't want to finish the
Yeah.
trilogy, or they have to
Hmm.
do something different and move on. And so now you have to impart whatever the story is and whatever the tone is onto a new filmmaker who inherits what's already been established, which is
Yeah.
always just a very, very tricky proposition, and I think feels somewhat disconnected from what you got. And
Hmm.
that's just one of those things that we always have to deal with in a creative medium. And so it's the same thing here. And a part of it I definitely kind of raise my eyebrow at as I'm watching the show, but then also another part of me has to just give them a little bit of grace and extend just the
Yeah.
patience that, this is one of the things where it could have been a completely different thing where they didn't acknowledge anything that happened prior to it, and we could just be getting
Hmm.
something brand new, which I don't know would have, at this point, I just don't know if it would have been better or not. But I also get the feeling to a certain extent that this show, just 3 episodes in, so it could
Hmm.
change, but just so far, it kind of feels like Marvel Studios is trying to have their cake and eat it too, where
Mm.
it is connected to the Daredevil series,
Yeah.
yes, but also they are certainly putting their own stamp and
Hmm.
flavor and tone on it.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if that's going to work out for the story that they're trying to tell here. I mean, this all kicks off with the death of Foggy,
Yeah.
and that's a
Hmm.
just a huge shocker out of the gate, a very, very surprising opening to this series, which I don't fault them for. I think you kind of have to start off with a bang in that way since they've been
For
gone
sure.
so long.
Hmm.
But after we settle in, we get past that and it fast forwards a year, and then we find out that Karen's character has moved to San Francisco. So she's largely probably going to be absent for the rest of this season. Like
Hmm.
we might see her again in the finale, maybe. And
Yeah.
and also this second and third episode in particular, I don't know if I'm crazy, but it kind of feels like that this is what they probably originally were
Wanted
going
to do.
with
Yeah.
to begin with, and so they just kind
Hmm.
of reconstructed and sort of reconstituted where some of the story could fall, and sort of engineered this beginning so that yes, we can set it firmly within this universe, but we're gonna have that moment happen. It's gonna be emotional, it's gonna be impactful, but then we're moving on and we're gonna tell the story that we always intended to tell. I don't know
Hmm.
if you felt the same way or how you see that whole just that push and pull of just connecting it, but also still trying to establish something new with their own series.
No, that's exactly what I felt, and that's why again it's like that weird feeling when you're watching it. And in the beginning, like you said, we have Foggy and we have Karen here, and it's like, oh, the gang's all here, and of course the tragic death of Foggy happens, but then everything that kind of attached us to the old series slowly moves away besides Wilson Fisk. You know what I'm saying? It's like everything is now in the background except Wilson Fisk, who at this moment, in a good way, in terms of the story, is calling himself refined and he's running for mayor and all these other things. But that's not like the old series either. It's like everything is new and everything is different. We've thrown everything that we've known to the back. And so yeah, part of me even wonders, yeah, it's almost like how sure it's connected, but it's almost like at what cost or like for what reason. Sometimes I'm like, okay, it seems like you're doing your own thing anyway, and maybe there will be more things that pop up again that I just don't know about yet. Like you said, it feels like they are trying to have their cake and eat it too. But right, it felt like after episode one, it's like, all right, let's get back to what we were doing before. It doesn't feel connected. Nothing feels like old Daredevil. And so and maybe I agree with you. Maybe like episode 8 or 9, maybe Karen shows up, but in those in between times, beyond the relationship between Wilson Fisk and Matt Murdock, I don't even know why the old series exists. You know what I mean? Like I don't even know why it's I think a context in this show completely. So yeah, I'll have to see as time goes on. I think they have definitely the potential to use that to use the old Netflix and to put their own stamp on things, but again, slippery slope, and I think it could be tricky. And yeah, I don't know how they're going to do it, but I think they definitely still have a mountain to climb.
So, popular scooper, My Time to Shine Hello, he actually published a tweet earlier today talking about what the changes were or were not for this show. And he said that episodes 1 through 6 were
Mhm.
mostly kept intact, but were actually shifted to become episodes 2 through 7 instead. And that would actually align with the reports that they initially shot 6 episodes before they decided to do this creative overhaul. So if that's to be believed, episodes 2 through 7, I don't want to say are largely untouched. I'm sure that they've had to add things into those episodes to make them more organically connect to this larger story. But if we're to believe what he's saying, episodes 2 through 7 were probably largely what they shot before the creative overhaul. But the
Mhm.
premiere episode, as well as the finale, or at least the last 2 episodes, episodes 8 and 9, those are the episodes in particular where they stepped in, interjected, and said, "Okay, we have to do a little bit more to connect it to that Netflix show. How do we get back Foggy and Karen and Punisher and these other
Mhm.
characters? Like, how do we tie those things in?" And again, it remains to be seen if that's going to ultimately work out. I've read
Yeah.
from people who've seen all 9 episodes that it does leave you wanting more by the end of this first season. By the time you get to
Mhm.
episode 9, it does have you sort of salivating, like, oh, I can't wait for season 2. And then thankfully they're already
Mm.
shooting season 2 right now, and it'll be out, I believe, next year. But he also noted that episodes 8 and 9, that's actually when we'll see the return of both Karen, Punisher, and
Mhm.
I think even Bullseye as well. So
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
all this all kind of lends to the idea that yes, there was a creative overhaul, but how significant of an overhaul was it really?
Yeah.
How much did they actually change from what they initially were going after? And
Mhm.
again, I don't know if they even know the answer to that question. And I kind of feel it. I kind of feel it bursting at the seams of watching the show, where it's like, I feel you trying to tie in those things, but at the same time, it still feels like your own production, which
Yeah.
I'm not faulting either approach, but you do kind of have to pick. I think you have to pick and commit to a specific direction in particular. But I will give them a lot of credit for that opening with the death of Foggy. Just did not see it coming. It was just a
Yeah.
total surprise, very
Mhm.
emotional, and certainly for a character who I think a lot of people wanted to see him go out so
Yeah.
quickly and so decisively, thinking like, well, maybe he'll pull through, maybe he'll survive, but Matthew, he hears the heartbeat, goes away and dies, and in the midst of it, he's fighting Bullseye. So I mean, what are your thoughts on just like seeing that character who is so beloved and so connected to just Matt Murdock, and just what he's been as a character up until this point? What do you think about his absence now and what that's going to mean for the story moving ahead?
Man, this was, one of the, Foggy's one of the people that's been holding Matt down for so long that it they haven't really they of course they have reckoned with it. They have been on the course of like the whole fight between Karen and Matt, like, look, you haven't been talking to me, you've been gone for 2 months and all that stuff. But I really think the death of Foggy, of course, is the propellant of this entire season. That's going to be like he it means it's going to mean a ton that he lost his best friend. And I think I don't know, and I think he's going to have to, of course, reckon with that as he's reckoned with other loss in the past. But this one's different. This is, I think, it's actually a void in Matt's life now that he's going to have to deal with. It is going to be part of the reason he picks the Daredevil mantle back up. It is part of the reason he picks the court case up for Hector Ayala. It is going to be the reason he does a lot of things he does in this season. And it is really sad to see Foggy. Like, Foggy was one of the he was also comedic relief sometimes though too, right? Like, Foggy was often some of the levity in the show as well. It was always good to see him. We were always rooting for Foggy. Like, it's just like, dang, Foggy is out of the show. This hurts and this is crazy. But I think it is going to be interesting to see how Matt's character actually deals with that loss and how he contends with those things, because we know he can be good at compartmentalizing things. Matt Murdock can, and using them in other ways. And as you've seen in that first episode when he's on that rooftop fighting Bullseye, he was almost excited to kill Bullseye in that moment. Like, you got to die, bro. And I think that's going to be some of the things that we see later on of like, is Daredevil willing to kill people? And I think for himself, he got lucky, that he didn't kill Bullseye. He probably was relieved a little bit that he killed Bullseye, but there's the other side of him that's like, dang, I also didn't kill him, and so I think we're gonna deep dive into that stuff, and I think the death of Foggy is really gonna be the stamp that hopefully moves into the rest of the season. But the only reason I am apprehensive of that is what we just talked about. Is that was the death of Foggy even planned in these episodes? Will I even get a glimpse of Matt Murdock still, reconciling with the death of Foggy in these episodes? I don't know, but overall, man, I'm really sad to see Foggy go, and I really liked him as a character. It's like, dang, I'm really not gonna see him again.
So taking it with a grain of salt, if reports are to be true that have been out there, his death was planned all along. However, before the pivot to the creative overhaul, this was
Mm-hmm.
all going to happen off screen. They were just going to kill off the Foggy character off screen, which would not require Eldon Henson to
Okay.
come back. That's further distancing themselves from that Netflix series. However, they decided to draw this out and really extend this death scene and make it a moment, which
Mm-hmm.
was totally the right decision to do for the
Yeah.
context of that specific opening 15 minutes of the episode, which were really, really effective. I
Yeah.
cannot take away anything from them. It was a really effective and I think mostly well done sequence that was emotionally impactful and certainly set the tone for how everything else is going to play out here. Now that we've gotten the third episode and we're starting to settle into the season, my big apprehension now, of course, I'm
Mm-hmm.
starting to really miss Foggy as a character, but now that
Yeah.
we're getting more into the legality of Matthew Murdock and we're doing these courtroom scenes, not having Foggy present in that dynamic at
Mm-hmm.
all, I miss that. I miss that a
Yeah.
lot because he added so much to that stuff in the Netflix series whenever Matt couldn't show up or he was laying on
Mm-hmm.
his couch because he got fucking beat up the night before, whatever the case
Yep.
may be. Having Foggy be that secondhand person or even really the person in charge, kind of keeping everything on the correct path and sort of steering the ship when need be, was a really, really effective tool. And we won't have that. We now have like a new team of people that we
Mm-hmm.
have to invest in and grow to appreciate and love throughout the show, which I just haven't gotten there yet. You know, the work and the real estate for those characters isn't necessarily drawing me into them. And so that's going to be difficult, I think, as an adjustment. Just like everything he brought as a character, not only the friendship and the comedic relief, but also just from a story perspective, how much he
Mm-hmm.
means to that whole, you know, Matthew Murdock legality, courtroom drama aspect to the show.
Yeah.
And just that dichotomy between characters like Kieran and Foggy having to ground him and make him realize like what he has at stake in his life and what he could stand to lose by being this vigilante, you know, running throughout the night and trying to fight crime, all those different things of that nature. Uh, that that CGI in the opening scene in the fight sequence, not great, just not great stuff. There are like Hall of Fame fight scenes in that first Daredevil series. Like we talk about some of those one-shotters, those
Yeah.
hallway scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck, the prison breakout scene in
Oh my
season
God.
3 was
Yeah.
an all-timer action sequence for television. Just like really, really great stuff. And so there's already an expectation coming into this show. Like, well, how is the fight choreography going to look like? You know, what's that going to look like? And they did rehire the old stunt choreographer from that original show, but I don't know. It's not lining up exactly so far. I will say the end of episode 2, that close quarters fight scene in the apartment where Matt kills
Yes.
those police officers, that was
Yeah.
great stuff. But this opening one with Bullseye, where there's a lot of CGI and all of that stuff, and
Yeah.
I think all these years we've given a lot of excuses to Marvel for, you know, certain things that they've dealt with, just the strain on VFX houses, the different strikes that are
Mm-hmm.
happening, just the overworked tendencies of these different VFX artists, the crunches that they deal with, the lack of time. There's all sorts of factors, but you know, it's been years now, and we continue to just see like a product that I don't think lives up to the quality of what we're used to seeing. So I don't know. I just left that whole thing thinking, and you know, Foggy's death came very quickly after that, so I couldn't dwell on it for too long. But in the moment, I was
Mm-hmm.
just looking at it like this is not the same world we're even playing in from just like a filmmaking perspective anymore. It looks totally different.
Yeah. It didn't even like, in some ways, for even Disney, or not Disney, but these Marvel not necessarily TV shows, but it's just like, this is like extra. I don't know what this is. I don't know. There were just so many. It was just weird to look at. Why does this look so almost, it was so CGI that for moments I thought it was actually like animation. Like I thought I was looking at something that wasn't even live action
It was given
for a
Nintendo
second.
GameCube a couple of
Yeah,
times for
it was
sure.
bad. It was really bad. And I can't. And part of me wishes that they just went a different direction. Like I don't know, if you don't have the time or the, maybe do some different things with the camera, move it, but don't just put out this thing that looks like this. I don't know, it doesn't look good. Like figure out something else. It's crazy, man. And we've even talked about, I think before, how there should be a different standard when it comes to TV show CGI, right? Like when you're watching something on TV and you see CGI, you have a different thing in your head, a different expectation in your mind, versus when you go to the movies and see something CGI. We have established that, but there's still levels to it, right? And I think it still can't like take you out of the moment and what's happening, and that's definitely what the CGI was. It took me, I was like, huh? What is this? Is this like you said, almost a bad video game, like a bad video game rendering that it didn't even match? And there are even moments, I think, in Marvel TV shows where we say, hey, that CGI wasn't good, but at least it like didn't take me out completely. And those Daredevil scenes in the beginning, those fights, some of those scenes of him swinging on the rooftops in the beginning, I was like, no, you took me out of it. What is this? So yeah, it was pretty darn bad, man.
I think even to that standard of adjusting expectations between movies and television,
Mm-hmm.
Disney themselves, they've obliterated that line when they
Yeah.
decided to make these television shows as expensive as they are, and they
Mm-hmm.
themselves compared them to the quality of theatrical feature films. Bob Iger
Yeah.
said those words. You can expect theatrical level quality with these shows that we're putting out, these big tentpole shows, whether it's from Marvel or Star Wars or whatever the case may be. And there have been moments where that's been true. You know, I think that
Yeah.
there have been moments where it's like, yeah, this feels like this could be on a big screen, but when
Mm-hmm.
you see something like this opening sequence, that's not it.
Not it, dog.
If I saw that on a big silver screen at a movie theater, we're having an even much different conversation than right
Yeah.
now. I would just be
Mm-hmm.
outright angry at that. But it is what it is at this point. Though those are things that we can continue to dwell on
Yeah.
because it's not going away. Apparently, one positive, really hugely positive thing I do want to talk about this show. It is just like what they're doing with Charlie Cox, Vincent D'Onofrio, and their characters. And
Mm-hmm.
what I found thematically that stuck out about what we've seen so far is just the fact that these two guys are now in completely different places than where they were in the original Daredevil show. It has been canonically like 6.5 years since we
Mm-hmm.
last saw them. And we're finding both of them now almost rejecting their former selves, rejecting
Yeah.
their former lives, trying to
Mm-hmm.
move on, trying to change. Matt has pretty much retired from being a vigilante and being
Mm-hmm.
Daredevil, especially after the death of Foggy. He sees no point anymore. He's going to fight his battles within the courtroom. He's going to try
Mm-hmm.
to actually live within the law. And conversely, Wilson Fisk has transitioned and is now running for an elected official in office and becoming mayor of New York City and really trying to reform his old ways. And it's also interesting because the entire world knows that this guy has been a criminal for most of his life. And now he's trying
Mm-hmm.
to lead a new charge and have a different sort of paradigm shift within his own life due to personal choices, but also due to things that have happened to him. Like he's gotten shot
Mm-hmm.
in the face. His wife, Vanessa,
Yep.
has pretty much outright that she's cheated on him and moved on. She doesn't really love him in the
Mm-hmm.
same way anymore. So what did you think about that? Just that dynamic sort of being the centerpiece of this show. These two guys moving on from who they used to be and trying to be something that they, I think, inherently are not. That's really what it's
Yeah.
about. Like inherently,
Mm-hmm.
they're not these people, and we already know as audience members, we're smart enough to know you are going to be who you truly are underneath all of this.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to see you return to that former life, and there have been small things that have happened already in these 3 episodes. But what do you think about that pathway that they've set up with these two characters so far?
It's interesting. You talk about, of course, how they are rejecting their past selves, but it's funny in episode 1 when they do meet in the diner and we have that very electric conversation. They're also both rejecting each other's past self. Like, you better not be no vigilante no more, and he's over here like, well, you better not be no kingpin no more. You know what I'm saying? I think it's a really cool idea. Like, everybody rejecting everything except for these two new people that they want to be in some ways. I think it's such a hard thing to reckon with, I think, for their characters, because they are attempting to chase what they believe to be better or what they believe to be growth. Like you said, Charlie Cox, he like, look, I don't want to be a vigilante no more. I need to do what I want to do. What I need to do in the courtroom. I want to be better at doing that. That is, in his mind, being a better person. Wilson Fisk, on the other hand, is kind of the same way. He's like, look, I'm not that guy anymore. I'm reformed. I'm running for office. Like, he's attempting or wanting to attempt to chase something that he believes to be better. And so, like you said, us, the audience, we're watching like, so which one of y'all gonna crack first? Which one of y'all are gonna go back to your old selves first? But it's I think it's a very smart way to start the show, because again, it does show that these characters are somewhat self-aware and they do want to grow, and things have happened to them in this time that we've quote unquote been away from them, or things have transpired, and they are different characters. But like you said, in the same way, we're like, we know who you are at your core. And it's also funny because that's what they're telling each other in that scene as well. Matt Murdock is like, Kingpin, or Wilson Fisk, I know you're Kingpin, like, I know who you are. And they never really say it with their words, but they say it the way they look at each other. You better not be no vigilante. And Matt Murdock in one hand is like, oh, I'm not gonna be a vigilante anymore. But us, the audience, is like, man, he's definitely finna be a vigilante again. So I think it's a very good strength in the show that they decided to use that dynamic, this both new old thing, kind of playing with these characters moving forward and in this season.
Well, here's the thing about these choices that these two have made. These are forced positions that they're in. These are
Mm-hmm.
not two guys who all of a sudden woke up one day and said, you know what? The way that I was living, it probably wasn't the way to go. I'm going to make a change. We're going to start over today. It's day one of
Mm-hmm.
the rest of my life. That's not the case for either of them.
Yeah.
Again, Matt, a lot of what's motivated him and put him on this trajectory is simply just put the death of Foggy and the fact that he couldn't
Mm-hmm.
protect his closest friend. and he's just found that I think he's probably more useful. At least that's what he thinks. He's more useful working within the law as opposed to being this vigilante. And
Yeah.
then Fisk, everything he's been through. I mean, hell, even at the end of season 3 of Daredevil, I rewatched the whole series about a year ago, and at
Hmm.
the end of season 3 of Daredevil, he gets into this big brawl with
Hmm.
Daredevil, and they ultimately have to come to some sort of agreement, knowing like you're in an immovable force and I'm an unstoppable
Unstoppable
object.
object.
Like
Hmm.
we can never, unless both of us perish and die, like we'll never be able to coexist unless we both kind of put this down and move on. And they come to this agreement, and Vanessa's also like very much wrapped up in that whole thing because he cares for her
Hmm.
so much. And so it was really out of self-preservation that Fisk made this choice because of his relationship with Vanessa. And then of course also his sort of his disappearance and moving on to do other things with the Echo character, and being wrapped up with Hawkeye and all that different stuff, going through a pretty life-changing circumstance and having his face shot off essentially. So these
Right.
are all just very forced positions, and it's just a matter of time before they get back to who they are. Because I think the age-old question that has been examined in many stories, and especially comic book stories, is, can a leopard change their spots? Can they ultimately become
Hmm.
something different than what they inherently are? Most times we see no, who you were and who you moved as and who you are, it's there, it's always going to be there. It's just certain things have happened to sort of alter that fate for you at the current sort of moment that you might find yourself. um Fisk in particular, into this political sort of realm that he's entered into, his whole campaign is kind of built off this idea of anti-vigilantism. He's very much
Hmm.
opposed to that. That's been his whole platform, and this New York City, within the
Yeah.
context of this universe, that's an important thing that we see because crime is just rampant, of course, and they deal with the world of superheroes in the MCU. And there's
Hmm.
the moment where he name checks, Daredevil and Punisher. He even name checked Spider-Man at one point. I'm interested to see how much of Fisk we see after this show in the
Hmm.
MCU, because if you're mayor of New York City, which is the
Yep.
centerpiece of the MCU, of the Marvel Cinematic
Hmm.
Universe, you have to be around. Like, do you anticipate that we could see Wilson Fisk in Thunderbolts, which largely looks to be centered in New York City? Could we see him in, I don't know, another show that comes up? Could we see him in
Hmm.
Spider-Man when that comes out next year, the next Spider-Man movie with
Hmm.
Tom Holland? Like, what do you think the presence of him is going to look like if he were to retain this seat as the mayor of New York City in the MCU?
Yeah, I think it'd be really cool for the MCU, and part of, I think, something we were talking about, where like Wilson Fisk being a big figure in New York could be really cool for the MCU. There's a lot of things at play after that happens. And I I don't know if it'll be in Thunderbolts, but knowing that there's some politicalness to it, knowing that Bucky is running for whatever he's running for. What, senator? I forgot what Bucky's running for, but he's running for some kind of office. And in the tower, they have to be at the tower in the middle of New York, which they're calling Bow's Tower now or whatever. I don't know. I feel like the presence of the mayor, knowing it's Wilson Fisk, should be somewhere in these next couple in these next couple projects. I want to see, like, it doesn't even have to be big. I just kind of I even want to see like a Daily Bugle newspaper with like Wilson Fisk does this thing, and I'd be like, oh, that's really cool that we're talking about it, because now we can use it in Spider-Man if you want to. Now we can use it to move the politics around in this MCU world, because so much happens in New York. Like, New York is such a big city in Marvel Comics and in the MCU. If you're telling me Wilson Fisk, the guy we're watching on Daredevil right now, was mayor, he got to be somewhere. So let's talk about it. So I hope that's the case. I'm weary about him being in Thunderbolts, but part of me has a good feeling knowing that Charlie Cox does have a relationship with old Spider-Man. I guess he doesn't know who he is anymore, but that they should be able to, I think, reuse that idea for a future Spider-Man project or something else down the line. I have a feeling they'll use him somewhere.
Oddly enough, I feel like Thunderbolts is the most likely
Hmm.
of projects that he would appear in because of the already political connections with Bucky's,
Yeah.
I guess, aspirations to have a Senate seat. Contessa, she's also involved in political things
Hmm.
as well. A lot of that is New York centric. Sentry's going to be in the movie. It looks like he's going to decimate New York City, at least at a certain point in the film.
Yeah.
It feels like that would be the most likely, considering that we just don't know really anything about the Spider-Man movie. I mean, for all we know,
Yeah.
that could be set on Battle World, which would be completely removed from all of this,
That's
to
true.
begin with. And so, if he were to pop up in something else, that would be my guess.
Hmm.
But it also, I don't know exactly how much of that movie will be primarily set in New York. Like, it could be a situation where it's just the third
Somewhere
act of the
else.
film. It could just be
Yeah.
like the final moments and not really a primary sort of location for where they're going to tell that story. One of the, I guess, cool things about this show, they are paying homage to a lot of other great crime dramas. The whole diner
Hmm.
scene is an homage to Heat. There's
Easy.
an homage to The Godfather in there. I don't know if people call it. There's
Hmm.
even just this idea of like Fisk and Vanessa taking therapy, very much an homage to The Sopranos. You know,
Hmm.
seeing Carmela and Tony sitting down with
Hmm.
Dr. Melfi in The Sopranos show, trying to fix their marriage, and that's what Fisk and Vanessa are trying to do throughout this show. It's very different than how they started off in that original Daredevil series. She kind of grounded him in many respects and kind of got
Yeah.
him as powerful as he was. She was his
Hmm.
rock and she was very there. Now she's moved on because he moved on and did different things, and she was left to run the business. And according to her, the business has never been as successful as it was since she's been at the helm. She actually got it to the place that it needed to be while he was away. What do you think about just that dynamic of seeing them, sort of go through this therapy and trying to fix and mend their relationship? And also, whoever this new guy is that she's moved on with, do you think
Hmm.
he survives the season? Because I got a feeling Fisk is going to find out whoever this is. Well, he already knows who he is. He brought up his name.
Yeah.
I got a feeling he's
Hmm.
going to kill him. That'll probably be the moment where we see Fisk just return to his former ways, because I don't know if he's going to be able to live with the idea that his Vanessa has moved on and fell in love with another person.
Yeah, because that's in a lot of ways that's Kingpin as a character. Everything he does is for Vanessa. We even see that play out in Spider Verse. You know what I mean? Into the Spider Verse, Kingpin has the same like everything is for Vanessa, and so I definitely think you're right. I don't think whatever guy that she is seeing now is going to make it. That his mind won't even be able to fathom that guy existing over him in Vanessa's life. He will not have it. But yeah, man, it is an interesting and different dynamic because uh, I like it though because I think that's his motivation. Which you pretty much said it and you pretty much talked about it. That's his motivation for kind of reverting to his old ways. And you said Vanessa kind of grounded him in a lot of ways. Well, maybe this is the thing that ungrounds him again, both grounds and ungrounds him again, and gets him off the leash to become Kingpin. Is this crazy stuff that's going on with Vanessa? And so, yeah, man, I think I like it because it adds a little bit flair to what Wilson Fisk and Vanessa have going on. It's very different, like you said, than what we've seen in the beginning. But I definitely think this is going to be the catalyst for what ends up turning Wilson Fisk, the mayor, back into the Kingpin that we know.
I don't remember when he said it. It might have been a while ago, but I remember Vincent D'Onofrio and talking about the character. He once said that Kingpin is a child. This is not a fully well-developed man. His
Hmm.
growth has been stunted because he's had extremely traumatic stuff done to him, and he's never fully grown up. And you can see all of that in just the ways he moves and operates. He lashes out, he has tantrums, he's physically abusive and
Hmm.
murders people. Like, he doesn't know how to harness those emotions. But Vanessa comes in and changes a lot of that for him and grounds him and gets him to think about things differently and to kind of keep his temper in check to certain respects, and just get him to, just take a breath, just think about what you're going to do here, be more calculating. Not that she's obviously leading him away from a life of crime. In fact, she was complicit in it and supported it and helped run that
Hmm.
whole element of his life. But I
Hmm.
think she got him to think a lot more strategically and help build the foundation for what he's able to do now as
Yeah.
mayor, to even be able to achieve this level of quote unquote reform. It wouldn't even be possible without her character. And so I'm glad that they are just going back to that, a lot so far in this show, and so heavily just making sure that we remember the importance of her and how much she means to him, and just like all of that maturation and all of that development that he's gone through up until this point. Episode 3 just came out. Did you watch episode 3 yet?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, so this is my least favorite of the 3 that we've
Yeah.
gotten so far. It was okay. The
That's
courtroom
fine.
stuff was
Yeah.
fine. It could have been more riveting. I do
Hmm.
like that it's here. I just wish it was a little bit more energetic and riveting, but it was
Hmm.
okay. But a lot of this was focused on the character of Hector Ayala, aka the
Hmm.
White Tiger, who had been teased was going to be in the show. We saw him on some surveillance footage in the first 2 episodes as this brand new character that was going to come into the MCU. Obviously, there's a lot of comic roots. This is
Hmm.
this is a Puerto Rican, sort of hero, vigilante that operates on the streets. His whole trial is the focus of episode 3. And at the end of episode 3, he gets snuffed out. He gets killed by, I would presume, somebody who is perpetrating as a Punisher supporter. We see that it's somebody
Mm-hmm.
wearing the Punisher skull. I highly doubt it's actually the Punisher himself. I don't think it's
Yeah,
Frank,
nah.
but it's
Mm-hmm.
somebody who thinks that they are, sort of in support of the idea of the Punisher and what he represents.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that decision to introduce a character that I think a lot of people were probably excited to see, and also presented a new opportunity for, I suppose, representation? It is a Puerto Rican superhero, which has not really been a thing in the MCU up until this point.
Yeah.
For him to just be killed so quickly and so decisively after going through everything that we went throughout the episode and having Matt ultimately acquit him for the crimes that he was ultimately being held up against for him.
Yeah, it's another one of those for me, I think, bittersweet moments, because on the bitter part of things, of course, I want this character to have more time to relish, to see through the, more episodes, to have more depth, for us to even, I think, get even more I think emotional in towards seeing the end for towards seeing the end for his character and his character arc. And it's just like, dang, you're gone already, like we just met you. And this is a case that is kind of interesting. You're a vigilante. You fight. You try to save somebody that seems to be innocent, and you end up, some guy actually accidentally ends up dead. What do you do? And now you're in court, and I don't know. It's a really interesting, I think, court case, given this guy's a vigilante, and of course it parallels Daredevil and Matt Murdock almost directly. But then, on the other hand, on the more, I think, sweet part of things, there's like a, and it didn't have to be his character, but I like that there was some sort of stakes somewhere. Somebody, it feels realistic towards something that would happen. Of course, in a lot of the other shows like this that we have seen, somebody, this person kills this person murders this person, and it's like, at what cost, for what reason, at what time, I don't know. But it's really weird to watch it, because it's like, dang, why does this dude have to go out? But at the same time, it's like, yeah, that is also interesting. Who killed this guy? Why did they do it? I don't know, man. It's really weird for me. Yeah, but I hate it had to be Hector. I wish it wasn't him. Probably wishes it was somebody else. But part of me also understands why they're trying to, or what they're trying to do. So yeah, I'm not sure. It's a
I'm
weird for me.
I'm mad at the idea that, first, this was completely preventable. This only
Yeah,
happened because Matt revealed his identity in the case. He used that to
which
win
is
the
crazy.
case.
It was insane.
In what world does that make sense? Matt Murdock is supposed to be one of the more intelligent heroes that we're dealing with. He went to
Yeah.
law school. He's an incredibly
Mm-hmm.
keen and sharp lawyer. He wins cases. He has heightened sensibilities and senses that he can use whenever he chooses to.
Mm-hmm.
And he uses this card to win the case. But I mean, he has to contemplate and consider that, well, at the point that I reveal his identity, now that puts him in danger. That puts his family in
Yep.
danger. He's going to be known to the
Mm-hmm.
world and to the city, and that's going to just put him in a very, very precarious position for something like this to happen. And that just feels like very, very sloppy writing to me. I just don't
Mm-hmm.
understand how we got there. Like, that just doesn't, like, the characterization of that just doesn't make sense for Matt Murdock. Like,
Yeah.
that's something a stupid person would do, not a very, very experienced, thoughtful lawyer to the
Mm-hmm.
stature of who we know him as. I
Yeah.
was more mad at that. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
didn't even have to get to this place to even deal with this. That just, from a characterization standpoint, you're making Matt look like a doofus, and I'm not a fan of that. And so that's kind of what irks me the most.
Yeah.
Albeit now it's at the expense of a character who could have been serviced better, who could have had even
Mm-hmm.
cooler things to do, who we
Yeah.
only saw on surveillance footage. We never even got to saw him properly be a vigilante and operate within this world. It was just a disposable character that
Yeah.
was brought into this to service other characters. It's not that different from fridging, that happens to female
Mm-hmm.
characters. They get
Yep.
disposed of to advance the plot and the characterizations of their male counterparts. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
not all that different from that. And when you look at that, it's just like, okay, could we have used somebody else, maybe a no name,
Yeah. A
somebody that
different.
didn't have to
Yeah.
be White Tiger, the first Puerto Rican
I agree.
superhero that was going to be into the MCU? Like, that's just one of those things where it's like, you don't want to see that for any
Mm-hmm.
marginalized group that now has like their first opportunity to see themselves on screen, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
within 45 minutes it's like, oh well, he's gone again, and we don't have Miles Morales in the MCU, so now we're just going to be waiting. We're just going to be sitting on our hands and waiting for this next hero to come.
Yeah.
But we'll see how the rest of the season plays out. There are still 6 episodes to go. There are viewership numbers out so far for Daredevil Born Again. According to Variety, Born Again launched with 7.5 million views in its first 5 days of availability on Disney Plus. So that's accounting for the 2 episodes that premiered, not the most recent 3rd episode. For context, when looking at Daredevil Born Again's performance alongside some other shows on Disney Plus, Agatha All Along in 7 days pulled in 9.3 million views. Loki season 2 in 3 days, even less than Daredevil Born Again, pulled in 10.9 million views. The Acolyte, one of the most reviled series on Disney Plus, one of the most hated, I would say, in just 5 days pulled in 11.1 million views. And then Percy Jackson and the Olympians, which came out last year, pulled in 13.3 million views in 6 days, one of their better performing shows. And so when you look at Daredevil's performance in context with these other recent Disney Plus shows, it's a little bit on the lower end. It's not terrible. I think you could compare 7.5 million views to many shows on cable, and it's probably exceeding some of those numbers that you see on just regular cable shows. But again, this is all within context of Disney Plus. It is on the lower end of things. What do you make of that? What do you attribute to that number and just ultimately how it pulled in, an impressive, I would say, 7.5 million views, but it is somewhat of a downtrend compared to what we've seen from prior shows.
Yeah, the Daredevil has a lot. I wouldn't say going against it because, like you said, 7.5 million views is very impressive. I think, I think it did a good job. Again, especially in 5 days. I think first and foremost, honestly, a lot of people didn't watch the Daredevil on Netflix that I've learned recently. A lot of people didn't honestly just didn't even watch that show.
It did get canceled.
It did get canceled.
It did get canceled for views. So yes.
But also it was a niche audience. Daredevil was a niche audience, and it was like if you know, a lot of times when it came to really all the Defender shows, it was like, do you watch this thing? It was like yes or no, maybe. I might watch it. So I think that's one thing going with it. But also we haven't. Like Agatha All Along is coming after WandaVision. Loki season 2 is coming after season 1. The Acolyte is coming from all these other Star Wars shows. Of course, there's been other MCU shows, but this one is different. This one doesn't necessarily have, I think, the best prerequisite prequel to get here. So that's why I think the 7.5 million. I think it is impressive. I think it did pretty good. I honestly couldn't see it doing better. I think I'm glad to where it ended up, but I think that number makes sense.
Let's not forget that this is an extremely mature show. All of these other shows are much more appropriate for younger audiences to watch. I don't think parents who have Disney Plus are going to let their 6-year-olds watch Daredevil Born Again. There's a lot of death and murder and blood and all sorts of stuff, and so that's also a big factor that, as with rated R movies on the theatrical side, they just don't make as much money as you could with a more widespread rating that would be suitable for multiple audiences. And so I don't think we can forget about that. I think everything else you said is also true. Like a lot of people who did watch the Daredevil Netflix show, they knew about it, but it was not necessarily something that lit the world on fire when it came out. Critically, it did great, but it was not this juggernaut of a television show in terms of viewership. It never was that. And so I'm not all that surprised. You do kind of hate to see a downtrend from other shows that have come out that have been more successful. But it is one of those things where it is a completely new experiment for them. It's a new character that's largely been isolated from the rest of their stories. And also, let's not forget about television. A lot of great television series over history have built momentum over time. They don't always start off as the biggest things ever. Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, if you look at the history and the trajectory of their ratings, they got bigger and bigger and bigger over time. Word of mouth is huge. People find out about shows late. They might have missed the first season, and they're like, hey, you should go watch this show. I just finished Paradise on Hulu. A lot of people didn't know what that show was in the first 2 or 3 episodes. But by episode 7 and 8, everybody's talking about it. And I think that show pulled in a similar number. I think it was around 7 million views in its first few days, but it gained momentum over time. That's just one of the natures and sort of the dynamics that you have to deal with in television, that sometimes it just takes time to build that momentum. So I wouldn't even be surprised if we see larger numbers later in the season for Born Again, and then by the time season 2 comes next year, they probably even surpass what's already been achieved in season 1. I would not be surprised at all. Last thing I want to quickly touch on, it's been confirmed that a Disney Plus special is coming next year focusing on the Punisher. Jon Bernthal, we know, is going to be in this season of Daredevil. He'll pop up at some point. They've already teased it. But they're going to give him his own Disney Plus special. This is interesting for a number of reasons because recently it had been sort of said on the part of Marvel that they were going to kind of do away with these. They weren't really doing these anymore. We got Werewolf by Night a couple of years ago. We got the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, but just due to the oversaturation of the amount of projects that they were doing, they were going to pull back on doing these Disney Plus specials. But now for
Mhm.
Punisher, he is getting something because Entertainment Weekly confirmed this, that he's going to be headlining his own special for Disney Plus, and he is writing the script. John Bernthal himself is writing the script alongside the director Reynaldo Marcus Green, who he also worked with on We Own This City, which is, by the way, phenomenal show, one of my top
Mhm.
10 shows of 2022. They're going to be helming the standalone special. They said this. Brad Winderbaum, the head of Marvel Television, he told this quote to Entertainment Weekly. He said, "quote It's like a shotgun blast of a story, but also has all the pathos and emotion that you want out of a Frank Castle story." John Bernthal also recently talked about it this past weekend at South by Southwest. He said this to the Hollywood Reporter, quote, "I care very deeply about Frank. I'm really grateful that I'm getting the opportunity to tell this story that I think the fans deserve. We're giving it our all, and we're trying to tell a Frank Castle story that we're going to turn back, that we're going to turn our back on the audience. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be light. And I think the version that this character deserves, and I'm just beyond honored and grateful that we get the opportunity," end quote. How do you feel about this? Are you excited about this? Do you want to see a standalone special? What do you think that they can do with a Frank Castle sort of standalone story separate from this Daredevil show?
Hell yeah, I'm excited for this for a lot of reasons. I love John Bernthal's Punisher. I just think I think he really does understand and get the character from the depictions that we've seen of him. So very super. I like this a lot. I honestly didn't know John Bernthal writes. Is that a thing? Does John Bernthal write? Like, is that a has he done that in the past?
I'm not sure. Actually,
I'm
I don't
not
know what his
sure.
writing credits are. He might have,
Mhm.
he might have actually wrote stuff on the original Punisher show on Netflix, if I'm not mistaken. He might have
Mm.
actually been a part of that creative team to write things and to
Mhm.
help bring that character to life. I would not be surprised. He seems, for a character like that he has invested so much time into,
Yeah.
at a certain point, that's something you take ownership of. We've seen a lot of people do that. Recently, we just saw Tom Hardy was very much involved
Yep.
in
In
the
Venom.
creation of Venom and being
Mhm.
a producer and being a writer, all those different things. So it doesn't surprise me actually that he's taking so much ownership.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. But it also makes me excited, right? When both your writer is your actor. I don't know. Sometimes it just works out really well because they understand the project that they have. And the way you talk about We Own the City, bruh, it sounds and just knowing what that show was about and the tone of that show mixed with the Punisher, I mean, it's like, duh. I don't know. I think it makes a ton of sense. And also, to add on top of that, to be honest, the Disney Plus specials have been good. I like Werewolf by Night. I like
Yeah.
Guardians of the Galaxy special. They honestly, they should probably stop doing shows and just do specials. If we being for real, that should be the probably the only thing that they do. But like, man, there's nothing about this that really has me wavering besides it being a little bit, under the MCU. But I like this a lot, and I think if they do it right, which it sounds like they are, I love the way this sounds. I'm here for it, man. Let's do it.
Dude, this is great. This is also one of those things where you don't have to invest and spend 6, 8, 9 hours into something. We know that this
Hmm.
special is probably going to be somewhere in the vicinity of, I would say, between 35 to 50 minutes, maybe,
Yeah.
potentially even an hour. But it's going to be a one shot sort of deal.
Hmm.
And one of the great things about those other specials like Werewolf by Night or the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special is that they lend themselves to being easily rewatchable. I've watched both of
Yeah.
those specials multiple times now because it's like I could just
Hmm.
pop that on really quick and just churn it out, and it's a great experience. And so
Hmm.
I have no doubt that it's going to be good, especially a focused story for just a few minutes with Frank Castle in his own world like that.
Hell
That's
yeah.
the perfect medium, I think, for his character. They tried to show stuff on Netflix. The first season was okay. The second season definitely dropped off in quality, but I
Hmm.
like this idea of just giving him sort of a standalone hour-long special. Do what you want to do with him, and obviously keep it dark, gritty, gory, bloody, all of that stuff that
Hmm.
we know the character to be. So it'll be interesting to see if they set any connective tissue to that special in this first season of Daredevil when he does appear at some point. But we will certainly have to see. But folks, with all of that said about Daredevil, those are all of our thoughts on the premiere episodes of Daredevil Born Again. If you've checked out the latest Marvel Studios television series, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think about it.